A portion of this video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. When Fallout is mentioned, most people think of the games in recent history. Fallout 3, 4, New Vegas, 76, but some people also think back to the roots of the series with the top-down CRPG games like 1 and 2. But no one in their right minds ever thinks of the Fallout game that was released in 2004 with the name of Brotherhood of Steel, a linear hack-and-slash game in a family of RPGs. Now, I know what you're thinking. Brotherhood of Steel, they're pretty cool. Power armor, cool guns. Well, let me stop you right there before you get your hopes up, because this game is nothing that you'd expect coming from the series that we all know and love. In fact, for a game named after the Brotherhood of Steel, it's one of the only games to not have cool power armor on the cover. Instead, it has these two action heroes trying to look all cool and edgy. At least when New Vegas did it, they still chose a cool ass outfit to showcase. There are many things in the series of Fallout that this game did first, actually. This was the first Fallout game released on a console, and that's not so bad. Console gaming was booming in the early 2000s, so it only makes sense. But they went a little too far overboard and completely neglected the PC, with the title only ever releasing on the Xbox and the PlayStation 2. This was the first Fallout to ever be considered a 3D action-adventure game instead of a role-playing game, either of the computer or tactical variety. It does have this really weird top-down perspective, similar to the 3D isometric prior titles, and it's kind of terrible. They borrowed the engine from Baldur's Gate's Dark Alliance on the PS2, a game that was actually good and made good use of it. And it's more than just the engine. They pretty much cloned the entire game and just slapped Fallout on it. The graphics, user interface, combat system, everything. Which makes sense why this game doesn't really feel like Fallout, because it's pretty much not. Just a reskin of Baldur's Gate. A reskin that they didn't even ask permission to do and made it look so much worse. Just look at these character models. This is the first Fallout game to feature heavy metal music as the soundtrack, with tracks from the likes of Slipknot and Killswitch Engage instead of songs that make it feel like retro-futuristic 1950s, like songs from the Inkspots. And just as a bonus, this is also the first Fallout with no Ron Perlman as the narrator, which is truly a shame. This is the first Fallout to forego creating a character, completely stripping the role-playing from the soul of the game. But in exchange, it's also the first game where one of the characters you can choose to play as is a ghoul. I don't think any game since has offered that either. It is tempting to play as him due to this, but he's also quite terrifying, just kind of staring like that demon from Insidious. What? He also does the Naruto run like a weeb. There is also no Nuka-Cola in this game, and instead some wonderful product placements of the energy drink Balls, that I only know is a real life drink because I shop at Micro Center. I've never seen it on a shelf anywhere else in my life. There are plenty more things to list in this fashion, but instead of speaking of this game like this, let's just take it from the top and dissect this whole project. But first, a word from our sponsor of this video, Surfshark VPN. Surfshark VPN keeps your online identity safe while you browse, game, or watch your favorite shows from all the prying eyes of cybercriminals and big corporations alike. There are always people trying to cause chaos across the internet, whether it be malicious or simply a prank. Surfshark has your back. A common thing in online gaming is DDoS attacks through your IP address, and with Surfshark turned on, your potential attacker only sees the VPN's IP address and not yours. And even things as simple as logging into free public Wi-Fi can allow hackers to gain access to your personal information in seconds, and Surfshark again can keep you safe from these attacks. It's not all just defense from prying eyes though. A VPN has the ability to change your virtual location, which makes you harder to track down, but it also allows you to bypass certain region lock content like watching shows on Netflix or videos on YouTube that may be blocked in your country, and also allows you to search Google without suggested ads or filtered content, getting truly organic results from your search, on top of countless other benefits and utilities that you can get from Surfshark VPN. So keep yourself safe online and get Surfshark VPN today. Use my code HAMMERS for 83% off and 3 extra months for free. There is also a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there is no risk to try it out. Click the link in the description and try it today. Thanks again to Surfshark. Now back to the video. Fallout Brotherhood of Steel was developed by Interplay Entertainment in 2004, the company that started the series to begin with. Like I said earlier, this was the first Fallout game strictly designed for consoles, and with the change in approach, it's the most unique Fallout game in terms of, well, pretty much every aspect, from tone to gameplay to aesthetics. It changed nearly everything, and as we'll discuss, was a massive blunder to the series and to Interplay as a whole, and resulted in this title being the last Fallout game that they would ever make before they sold the IP off to Bethesda to bring it to where we know it now. Many people talk trash on Bethesda's direction with the series when they released Fallout 3, but just looking at this game and the potential sequel that was also in development, it's clear to see that Interplay was going to do nothing good with the series, and Bethesda's acquisition may just be the best thing that could have happened. Van Buren seemed pretty promising, but I think that Bethesda was the right direction. This game follows an initiate of the Brotherhood of Steel, as they go on a mission to rendezvous with some high-ranking members of the Brotherhood. Arriving to the town of Carbon, Texas, you run into some raiders harassing the people of the town, led by a raider named Jane, a character that I can only imagine was formed from the thoughts of a 13-year-old boy, but apparently was based on the 50s pinup model Betty Page, who was notorious for wearing black leather during photo shoots. So look at that, some 50s culture is in this game after all. Anyway, raiders are here and the Brotherhood is not. You help the town out in exchange for information on the missing Brotherhood of Steel members, and for the entirety of the game, you're just running on their heels, running through raiders, ghouls, robots, and ultimately a powerful faction of the super mutant army bent on taking over the Wasteland. Both the story and the level design are incredibly linear, with each objective having to be completed in a set order in order to proceed to the next area. There are a lot of levels, too many in my opinion, and they all sort of function the same. You're presented with swarms of enemies, whether they be the classics to the series like rad scorpions or raiders, or some new treats that this game has to offer like these little cricket looking things. There are also creatures that exist in the Fallout universe already, but this game took the liberty to change them a little bit. Like there are some rad scorpions that shoot venom from afar, or death claws that actually look pretty sweet actually, like some anime monster or some shit. Monsters aren't the only thing that they changed though. Look at what they've done to Vault Boy.
Look how they massacred my boy.
But really, that's the whole game. Several arenas of swarms of enemies to kill until you move on to the next area and do the same thing. There is very little else to the game. There are story beats here and there, very few and far in between, and maybe some other types of gameplay, like, platforming? You know, the exact thing that you want to be doing in a top-down perspective game with janky controls? Once you're done with one area, that is typically the last time that you see it, other than a few times that you backtrack in this game, but it's extremely linear in that sense. No free roam or revisiting cool spots, just smash all the enemies and move on. Surprisingly, there are skill levels and perks in this game, something inside the series just trying to cling on to whatever RPG elements that it can. Sad to say though, it's nothing substantial. Each character has some unique perks that they can usually get later on in the game, but for the most part you're just buffing some kind of element to the gameplay. You know, your standard melee hit damage, damage resistance, attack speed, all that fun stuff. Which brings us to the gameplay of the game. I will say, it's not the worst thing that I've ever played. It's kind of fun to run around and beat different enemies to a pulp, smashing stim packs like they grow on trees, but this is only my thoughts during the first quarter of the game, because you may be surprised to hear this, but it's just the same thing over and over again. It gets repetitive very quickly, like in the first mission quickly. You get sent into a warehouse filled with rad scorpions, and you gotta kill them all so all the townspeople can get in and use the warehouse without fear of a brutal death. You walk in and you get a task. 25 rad scorpions to kill in this area. Alright, cool, easy enough. Kill 25 and I'm done, right? No. This is just one section of the warehouse. You have several more to go, filled with more and more rad scorpions, which is fine in theory, but it just doesn't stop or change, ever. I cannot convey to you how quickly this game becomes stale. They had one mission structure, and that's about it. A far cry from the objectives in every single other Fallout game in existence. There is a variety of weapons to use, different melee or ranged weapons, but the shooting in the game is just completely ass. Because of the top-down perspective, you can't see things before before they're on your screen, and once they're on your screen, it's usually just better to hit them in the face with something rather than shoot them, especially in the early levels when the guns you find do fuck all for damage. It really becomes a headache later on in the game because enemies can see and shoot you from off screen, and you can't do anything about it until they are in target distance. While there are over 40 different kinds of weapons in different varieties, many of them function the same as others, but to the game's credits, there is a lot to choose from spiked gloves, baseball bats, pistols, shotguns, laser rifles, flamethrowers, grenades, and more. And depending on the enemy type, using different playstyles may be warranted. Take these swarming cricket looking things. At some points while going through the area that they are in, you'll find a flaming torch that works wonders on dispersing them. The boss battles too require you to again mix things up. Some of them aren't so bad, and some of them are terrible bullet sponges that take 20 minutes to kill, but most of them are pretty okay. The designs are usually really cool at the very least. Combat entails smashing the same button to swing your weapons ad nauseum. When deciding to use guns or explosives, you can either swing around to try and aim with the poor controls or use a lock-on system that is iffy. It's slow and it's clunky, and like I said before, it's often more worth it just to swing a melee weapon instead of taking the time to aim and shoot. But sometimes if you have a shotgun or something automatic, it makes the shooting a bit more forgiving. There is also a crouch and jump option that are pretty useless aside from a few platforming beats in the game. The crouching can't even be used to utilize stealth, a very non-existent skill that was present in every other Fallout game. Same with lockpicking, hacking, repair, and countless others. Hell, even speech isn't involved in this game at all, and charisma only takes a role in barter pricing. Speaking of which, the saving grace of this game is the stimpack use. Stimpaks and caps are just about the only thing worth collecting in this game, and the only thing worth spending caps on is stimpaks. You can find pretty much all the armor, weapons, and ammo that you need in the levels, and personally, most of the combat engagements I did in the game involved smashing the melee attack move, alternating with popping a stimpak. I was just berserking into enemies every chance that I got, and maintaining the health bar with dozens of stimpaks, so caps solely went into keeping them stocked. And if your rampage results in death for whatever reason, this game has a healthy amount of save points thrown around every corner. I don't know why they are placed so frequently in this game. I don't think the game is really that hard, at least on normal difficulty. I think maybe they put them on the map about every 5 minutes or so because they figured that's how long people would want to play in one sitting before doing literally anything else. I don't want to rag too hard on this game. People always hate in the comments when I make fun of janky games, and there are a ton of 187 ride or die fanatics apparently. This game is not the worst thing in the world. Honestly, the biggest detriment to the game isn't the combat in my opinion. Even though it is stale, it is functional. The lack of an open world map and free roam environments is just criminal in a series like Fallout. And that's what these games are all about, roaming a wasteland and uncovering interesting people, enemies, and everything in between. Confining the lore of this series to a level-based beat 'em up is just tragic, and by far the main thing holding it back. Well, that and the story. It's pretty much non-existent, but when it is present, it's not good.
When guard duty over, Bob, me have to go buddy. Just wait, guard duty is almost over. But me have to go bad. Okay. You go, I'll stay.
So you arrive in Carbon looking for your Brotherhood buddies and find Jane and her bad boys making demands before strolling off. A few raiders remain that you take out in a local bar run by a man named Armpit. Charming fellow.
Thanks for taking care of him, stranger. My name's Armpit.
Once the raiders are clear, you talk to people around the town for information, and no surprise comes when they all have things for you to do in exchange for this info. Most notably, the mayor needs you to clear a warehouse full of rad scorpions before telling you that the Brotherhood paladins went down into the ominous crater in the middle of the town. This ends up being all a ruse, as the mayor somehow beats you down there and ambushes you because he's working with the raiders, not for them. So he wants to kill you, of course.
I'm not normally a violent man, but I think I'll enjoy killing you.
After taking care of the large man, you head back up to the town where the raiders have again come back to wreak havoc, starting with burning poor Armpit to death. The rest of the town lock themselves in the now cleared warehouse that you helped create and won't open the door until you kill all the raiders, so you run around the town playing hide and seek with countless enemies that took a lot of backtracking in my experience to find them all, until you eventually get the all clear and enter the warehouse, where a girl named Vidya, a former Followers of the Apocalypse member, has taken charge of the town. The next best choice after the corrupt mayor and Armpits, I suppose. You find out that Jane and her cronies are in the mill just outside of town, so you head there to take them out for good.
Matron usually hangs around there, so she likes the vibrations.
You run through the mill, unlocking mechanisms and of course killing raiders before finally finding Jane, who's having a talk with the super mutant about selling slaves to them for their army. The super mutant leaves even though Jane begs for his help, and you confront Jane while she's all alone, who is rightfully pissed at you for killing all of her men. First, you ask her some questions while she stands there with the most animated idle animation in the game, and she tells you that she was actually working with the Brotherhood and giving them information on the super mutants, and she says that they headed off to a ghoul city. But she ultimately still wants to kill you for messing everything up, and as you fight, she takes a considerable amount of shots to kill, which is surprising given the stark lack of armor on her. You head back to Carbon and you meet up with the Wanderer, who I guess is supposed to be the protagonist from Fallout 1. I don't know if it matters, this game most certainly is not canon, but he offers to take you to the ghoul city called Los. As you get to the city, you arrive to find a city of ghouls, and a lot of them are run by a cult of sorts, although there are a handful of friendly ghouls as well, including another returned character from the series, Harold, the ghoul whose body slowly gets taken over by a tree. You also meet yet another known character to the series, Rhombus, the Brotherhood of Steel paladin from Fallout 1, and also one of the guys that you've been trailing all game. Rhombus is tied to a wall and he's the only brother still breathing. The rest were killed by ghouls and super mutants, which brings up an interesting thought. This is a game called Brotherhood of Steel, yet this is the only Brotherhood of Steel member in the entire game that you meet. You don't find any more paladins or scribes, and you yourself are an initiate, but not even fully joined into the Brotherhood yet. Just Rhombus holding it down for the entire title of the game. Gotta love it. You free Rhombus and then you do an escort mission with him to go into a secret vault called by name Secret Vault to find out what the super mutants are so interested about in there. On the way, you kill a ghoul cult leader as a side project, and once you obtain the keycard to this secret vault, Rhombus gets murdered by a ghoul who just happens to sneak up on him. In the vault, you run into super mutants as enemies for the first time, and pretty quickly you run into the leader of this army named Attis.
I am Attis, a general in the mutant army.
But don't go thinking that the game is over just yet, bucko. Even though you do a full boss battle and you fight him and almost beat him, you still lose. And then he chops your arm off and he throws you into a hole that drops deeper into the vault. A vault citizen is down there chilling and offers to help. You can't run or use two-handed weapons for this next part because, well, you ain't two-handed no more. But soon enough, you wake up in another part of the vault with your arm back and you meet some other vault dwellers. Most importantly, the head of vault security named Patty, who gives you a bunch of objectives to complete in order to safely leave the vault, like opening air vents or killing death claws in the ruins to save a scientist, and of course killing the remaining super mutants. A lot of super mutants, until running into Attis again for round 2. You find him in the lab and he explains that he's there because the vault has some form of the forced evolution virus, or FEV, the goop that made the super mutants to begin with. But this strain of FEV was not so good, and after Attis injects himself with it, he ends up getting a form of super mutant cancer, I guess. This boss fight is ridiculous. It takes like 20 minutes to chip away at Attis's health bar, and even after beating him, he mutates into a pile of flesh and becomes a Resident Evil boss all of a sudden, slowly taking over the vaults. I guess this was the game's riff on the Master from Fallout 1. So now you do several more fights with several mutated appendages scattered around the vault that all take a bunch of time to beat as well. You also come across that vault dweller chick again as she's trapped in a pile of Attis, and she tells you about a way to make the vault self-destruct to destroy the mutant takeover and a monorail in the vault that we can use to escape. She also asks for you to mercy kill her because she is slowly being eaten alive and would rather not be.
Please, before you go, kill me. Don't let it eat me alive.
So after fighting yet another instance of Addis popping up, you do just that. You activate the self-destruction of the vault and escape in the monorail. Bingo bango bongo, I don't want to leave the Congo, but I do want to get the fuck out of Carbon. And this explosion likely nuked the whole place off the face of the earth, so it's a win-win. Needless to say, the game did not receive great reviews, but surprisingly, they weren't all bad. Most of the reviews chalking this game up as an entertaining but shallow and repetitive experience. So as far as most janky games go I cover, this one isn't really that bad. In fact, going into it, I expected it to be a lot worse, honestly. I mentioned briefly earlier that a sequel to this game was planned from Interplay. It started development before the first one was even done. They planned more combat styles with sneaking and a reputation system, honestly answering a lot of the concerns from the first game to make what sounds like a more entertaining experience. But due to the lackluster reviews and poor sales of Brotherhood of Steel, it was cancelled. And with that came the fallout. Not only was Brotherhood of Steel 2 cancelled, but so was Black Isle's Fallout 3, codenamed Van Buren, a very promising looking game that upset a lot of fans. And with both of these cancels came the cancellation of Fallout entirely, and even Interplay, the company, the whole thing just went under. It's not like this came out of nowhere, but it definitely was the straw that broke the Brahmin's back, and for a time this could have been the end of the series as we know it. Luckily, Interplay sold the IP off, and Bethesda picked it up and continued this lovely franchise. I and many others only know this game because of Bethesda, and even though they get a lot of shit, they did revive this series from certain obscurity. All in all, Brotherhood of Steel is not that good. If you like older games and more specifically hack and slash type stuff, maybe give it a go. If you're just a fan of Fallout, don't bother. It's barely a Fallout game, and none of the characters or lore is canon. Just skip it. As always, let me shout out my patrons for holding it down. Schwinn Dixie, Kid Kingpin, Not Much, Snowflake, Anonymous Starkweather, Zachary Parkerson, Crash Bandicoot 25, Ben Stevens, Ice Ham Jello, Grand Taquito, Potty, Yay Man, Marshall Duff, and Scribe Slendy. And my YouTube members, Grizzly Wizzly and Sexy Pickles. As always, thank you for watching. Hope to see you next time. And thank you for Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. Peace.